All right, so ask away. I saw someone saying when your child has stumbled onto something problematic, what's the best way to keep them safe without covertly monitoring? Even if there is monitoring, that doesn't mean they won't seek out inappropriate contact. Okay, there's a great model from Gail Dine's group, and I'm just going to share it here. I share it in the book called, she's got an organization called Culture Reframed, and I'm going to guess that this person might be talking about pornography. I'm just going to take a wild guess. If you're talking about extreme violence or something else, then I got you too. We can talk about that in a minute. But Culture Reframed has a really nice model for ways to talk about kids seeing porn. It depends how old they are too. If they stumbled on it, if they just sought it out. But it's important to talk about with kids and make sure that they have positive examples of sex education, whether it's a puberty book for younger kids or a book about sex and sexuality and dating and consent for older kids. It's important for kids to have access to other information, because when kids look for information, they're often getting more than they bargained for. If you know that you feel like you can't talk with your kids about sexuality because many of us were raised in ways that make that challenging, then I would make sure they can talk with their pediatrician or another trusted adult who has up to the minute positive information, can help your kid keep themselves safe, and is a trusted sounding board for your child's questions. Because the one thing we can't do in this day and age is ignore our kids' questions or say like, oh, I'll talk to you about that when you're older. Like whenever kids are asking about anything tricky, you want to say, I'm so glad you asked. And we really don't want our kids to Google it. It's so important that they don't Google it, because whatever they're going to Google, you're going to be like wishing they hadn't.
Yeah, that's great information. Rather than letting Google be the resource, you be the resource, you check it out. Yeah, that sounds like great information. So much great information, really. I have a question. You wrote the book Screenwise. Now you have a new book coming out in the fall, Growing Up Public. Between the times of these two books, yes, we had COVID, but what is the greatest change, and maybe also the greatest surprise about then and now?
I do think the ages of first everything has drifted down during the pandemic because kids were home a lot with Wi-Fi. So even if they didn't have a phone, they were in online communities at a much younger age, texting, again, even without a phone, but maybe texting on the, Google Hangout for school, for example, or on the school Zoom. So kids, and so you have just different developmental concerns. So anything that was developed as, say, a curriculum for teaching about texting was probably designed for middle schoolers or high schoolers. And so when you have third graders doing it, it's like just a different set of, first of all, literacy skills and keyboard skills. You have different kinds of like potty humor versus sex humor, with 7 and 8-year-olds. So it's just going to be like a different world. And I think it's very important to, have those conversations at a developmentally appropriate age, and just think about also how we're rebalancing since the pandemic. How can we get our kids back into also reading books and also playing instruments, in addition to all the cool things they're doing online, which are great. So we do want to support that kind of rebalancing in this moment, and, reacquainting with the novelty of things that are not on Hulu and YouTube. But yeah, those are probably the biggest change. And then I think Discord and TikTok are just so important now, and they probably weren't as important, 5 years ago, or didn't exist in the same ways.
Yeah, that's so true. I see a question from MK in the Q&A. What should a kid do if they receive inappropriate photos of other kids? Should they tell an adult, the person on the photo? How best to handle it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. First of all, if you know the person, you may want to let them know their image is circulating, but you may want to do that in the context of even going with them to the counselor's office so that they get some support immediately. I wouldn't just like drop that bomb on them, like on the way to first period, for example, because that's a heavy thing. I would get it off your own phone so that you don't get in trouble. I would not screenshot it and share it with anyone, even in the context of reporting. Like say it's so bad you want to report to the police. Like God forbid you get a picture of someone being sexually assaulted or a video, and you want to report that. Even that I wouldn't send. I would bring your phone to the police office, I have to tell you. And like, honestly, in that situation, like, be prepared. They might take your phone and keep it for a while for evidence, but like, that is the best thing to do, because you never want to be forwarding or sharing what could be considered pornography or a record of a crime or anything like that, for those reasons. And it's very important that kids do know that, but it's also important that they know that, if it's their image and they're scared to tell someone, that they have rights and that someone violated their trust. And yes, maybe they made a decision we would consider like not the smartest decision, but someone who is violating their privacy has made a much worse decision and a much more harmful and unethical decision. Simply photographing and sharing yourself, again, in Illinois and in most states, may be illegal for minors. But especially if you've shared it with someone who's asked for it, you haven't caused harm. I mean, if you're honestly, like, doing a thing that also some people are doing in high schools, particularly I'm hearing from girls that like boys are taking anatomical pics and sharing them to kind of harass girls. And again, I know I'm generalizing a little bit about gender, but this is kind of how this goes down. Like, that's also not okay. Like, they didn't ask for that picture. Most girls are telling me this is not a way. I had girls tell me, I used to think that guy was kind of cool, and if he'd asked me out, I would have said yes. And then he dropped that picture, and I'm like, I'm never even speaking to you again. I want nothing to do with you. So if you think this is also like, and I think it's fair to tell your sons this, if you think this is a way to get girls, like, guess what? It is not. They do not like it. No, thank you. And they can report you, and you have harassed them. Like, it is really a big deal.
Yeah. Lindsay, I know you've got a question.
I do. Is there one piece of advice that you find yourself going back to time and time again that you're giving to parents in need? Obviously, this is such a big discussion. I'm sure it can last much longer, than an hour or so. So is there one piece of advice that you would give parents in this big old conversation?
I think you want to look at your own tech habits, honestly, and make sure that you're thinking about what you're modeling. And I could be honestly more aware of that. Sometimes I can get a little bit all up in my phone. And I think it's important to really think about what you're modeling for your kids at all ages. If you text and drive, they're going to see that, right? And also to stay curious, not nosy, but curious and open. Like, if your kid has a leadership role, like moderating a Discord, like, tell me about that. Like, don't make assumptions about what they're doing, because a lot of what they're doing might be great, and they might be sharing really positive content and connecting with really great people, but you want to know about that. And then also mentoring over monitoring. I always come back to that, because truly every day we have experiences on tech that we could be sharing with our kids. We make mistakes. We witness other people do things also really well, right? Maybe we get a cool opportunity because of something we shared on LinkedIn or, Twitter. We want to make sure we're sharing with our kids the upsides of the positive parts of digital community, as well as the ways we're limiting the negative impact of the downsides, the way we walked away from a dumpster fire, on Facebook, or the way we, took care of ourselves around feeling left out after scrolling Instagram. So we want to really be mindful of our opportunity to influence our kids, and then make sure they have people to talk to if they're, for whatever reason, not going to come to us about something.
Question. What do you think, what is the question that you get asked most often by parents when you give this talk?
How do I know if my kid is ready for a phone? And I do have a class for first-time phone users, so I get that question a lot. And a lot of that is about emotional maturity, not just about an age. It's not like, oh, they get to this certain age. And it might also be that they're more ready for, a phone but maybe only with texting, or a phone that they only have a couple hours a day. I think a lot of people go from 0 to 100 on that front. And people also may overestimate the impact of a phone. If your kid's been home on Wi-Fi on the family computer for the last 5 years, there may not be that much that a phone is adding to their lives that you suddenly need to deal with. So it may be that, like, the conversations need to have when that first online access happens, more than just with a phone. So I think, when is my kid ready for a phone? And then we didn't talk, because this focus was really on reputation and privacy, but about sleep. But I just want to say to parents listening, if you have one hill to die on with your kids on tech, if you can make sure that they're unplugging at night and getting their sleep, that's so crucial for their physical and mental health.
And similarly, what in your educational, you know the landscape of this better than anybody, really. I'm always impressed by your remarks. What are some strategies, some specific suggestions for that family who has the light bulb moment? It's time. This has really impacted our lives. What do I do now?
You could read together a book like 24/6 about unplugging one day a week, and think about even taking short breaks every evening. Maybe it's just 25 minutes to play a quick board game. Maybe it's going for a walk and you all leave your phones at home. If you live in a populated area, you're not taking a huge risk. I don't think you're going to get attacked by a bear and not be able to call 911. Like, you're going to probably make it around the block. And so, like, what does that look like to just have those times together when maybe the phone isn't with you, or even put it away? And if you have younger kids and you're putting them to bed, can you put your phone away? So just taking steps. I also think it's important that we don't feel too guilty as parents, though, about the last 3 years. I think we've all been through a lot. And so I think it's also important that parents don't beat themselves up about their kids' screen time, but that they really get curious about, some of the big things that I wrote about in Screenwise, like creativity versus consumption and, balancing unplugged and plugged activities. But you don't want to just make yourself feel terrible. This has been an impossible situation for families in these last few years. And a lot of things have happened that may have made it really, kids are spending a lot of time on tech. I think we want to look at both the quality of that time and what we can do to balance that, but not sort of just drown in guilt.
Yeah, good. I'm throwing it back to Lindsay. She's got another question.
I see someone in the chat with a question about TikTok and the ability to focus and attention.
Well, thank you.
So
Yes.
there is research on both like dopamine and attention. I am not a cognitive scientist. I'm a cultural historian of media. So my PhD is in media technology and society. But I mean, I think we've all kind of casually observed some changes to our attention. So if you can do some things again to balance that out, even playing word games or playing board games, playing something like chess where you have to think ahead versus something like a video game where maybe the rewards are more immediate, just to kind of give your brain those different kinds of workouts, just like you would work on different muscle groups in the gym. I kind of try to think about that cognitively, or like doodling and having some time that's more open-ended mentally versus always scrolling and taking in information.
Good. Very good.
One more question from me. From a school district lens, I think something that we see quite often come through is the bullying piece of it all, unfortunately. And so what are some additional talking points for parents when we're teaching empathy, we're teaching some of those social emotional skills? What are some things that we can talk with them about? I know you mentioned, the teaching of there's always someone on the other side of the screen. So is there anything else that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think remembering there's someone else and even having kids dramatize text conversations like out loud to think about how someone might take something, because someone, might say something and not really think about the way it could be read. And also to help kids who are receiving messages, remember like, hey, if this is harmful, if this is not okay, I can unplug from this conversation. Again, I can get out. I don't have to upstand. I don't have to fight back. If the 6th grade group text is a disaster, if the 8th grade, social media scene is mean, like I can pull back and only choose to be connected with my few friends that really have a similar way of interacting, and I get their humor and maybe their humor works for me, but these other people, their jokes are hurtful and not funny. I'm going. And like, I mean, I have an 8th grader, like we've had those conversations, like some people are, funny / mean, and it feels a little more mean. So, maybe those are people you distance yourself from, whether it's at the lunch table or in group texts, but it can be hard. Kids don't want to be left out. So I think we also need to be giving them a lot of unconditional love, at any age, but even tweens and teens who can be so prickly and kind of harder to show affection to because they act like they don't need it. We need to be those unconditional sources of love and support for them and their pets, and their, like that kind of snuggling with the cat or the dog becomes so important because they are being judged. When they say, I feel judged, like they're not wrong. They're in a really judgmental space of peers at this age, and it can be hard to win. So I think it's good to acknowledge that and make sure they have spaces where they feel really safe.
So well said. Be the unconditional source of love with our kids because they are being judged. Final words. You're in the elevator with a parent. What's the one thing you want them to know about your new book and about this topic?
So don't freak out about your kid's reputation. Don't worry about them going viral for the wrong reason. These are the conversations you need to have with kids in growing up in public. And they're about all those different things that I mentioned, like, sexting and boundaries and what kids share about themselves and about, are we tracking them on grading apps? And it's going to be okay. The kids are changing the culture in a lot of good ways. So I think there's a lot to appreciate about kids. And I learned so much from interviewing teenagers in my research.
Kids are changing the culture in a good way. Let's stay positive. I really appreciate that. I always appreciate you. Thank you so much. And those of you that are here, make a phone call, text someone, and let them know that they need to be listening tonight at 7 p.m. when Devorah will come back and bring the kids too. Thank you.
Sometimes. Okay. Questions.
Hi, Devorah. I actually have a question.
Okay.
So my name is Shannon. I'm a senior at Glenbard North High School. And my question is, so if I have a friend who uses social media too much or it's excessive, how do I help them? Like, how do I give a reaching hand out to them?
That is a great question. I mean, it kind of depends, like you're too much, might be different than they're too much, but like say they're using it when they're around you and you want them to unplug. Is that what you mean? Or?
Yeah, that is what I mean.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think it's always fair to be like, dude, put away your phone, or, not to gender it, like, but like, hey, like, like I came all this way to see you, or like up here, just like, or hey, if I put away my phone, will you put away your phone? But like, if you can turn it into humor, for some people, that's a little bit less harsh. But I think it's also fair to like have a heart to heart with them and be like, I love you, I care about you, like you're my really good friend. But when you're all up in your phone when we're together, it makes me feel like, garbage, like it's not okay. And I think that's fair to say to somebody. And I would take that feedback to heart if that was me. Like, I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to put my phone right in my bag. I'm going to put it on airplane mode and I'm going to like lock in. And, or if I want to look at it together, I might be like, hey, can we like look at this together for a few minutes? Cause I have seen kids have really nice, and adults have nice shared moments looking at something together. But I think it's so easy to just get lost in it. And especially if there's like, like a heartbreak going on and they're like tracking their ex, or if they're like obsessing about something, it's very easy to get like hung up and like kind of forget that there's other people in the room. Like you could do that later. If you were worried more that they were like, say, posting something about themselves that was like harmful, or, I've definitely had teenagers tell me like, oh my gosh, my friend posts this thing and it makes me worried about her, or she's posting kind of extreme stuff, or he's posting things that I think don't reflect well on him, that I would call someone immediately. Like if say one of my friends, like, and I've had this happen as an adult, like where friends, like one of my friends posted a rant about something that happened at work. And I think her privacy settings were different than she thought. And I actually called her on the phone and I was like, oh my gosh, you need to go like get on Facebook and take that down. Like, I think that's what a friend does. What you don't do is screenshot it and share it. What you don't do is like draw people's attention to it. Like if you think somebody is like causing harm to themselves by what they post, like say they're to their reputation. Another example is a kid that I knew a few years ago had a great scholarship to college, and he was a senior. And he posted something about a tutoring service, and it kind of sounded like academically dishonest. Like it kind of sounded like borderline paper writing service. This is like pre-ChatGPT. Now who knows what that's going to look like. But anyway, he posted this, and I did text him right away because I had his number, because we knew each other, and not to his parents though. And I think this is for the parents and adults listening. If you know a kid directly and they do something like this, and again, this is not a situation where I thought he was in danger, then I might have called his parents. Like if he posted about suicidal ideation, that would have been different. But this was like borderline, and like maybe it was a legit tutoring service. It sounded borderline. I knew he had a scholarship to college. I wrote to him directly and I was like, this doesn't sound great. It sounds maybe like this. You should change what's on there. I don't want anything to happen to your scholarship. And I just straight up said that. And you know what? Maybe I'm risking the relationship with the kid, but I don't need to shame that kid. I don't need to drag them. I don't need to make them feel bad. Maybe it was an honest mistake. I think if you can give someone the benefit of the doubt when you're giving them the kind of feedback, it's better. Like it sounded pretty much like a paper writing service, but I was like, I'm sure you don't mean it to sound like this, but it sounds like, and I think that was he could hear that. And I think as someone who at the time was a professor, saying like, you could lose your scholarship, like was like a clue of like, okay, this is bad. I'm going to take this down. And I think that's what we should do when we see people mess up online, especially if we know them, like help them, don't share it around and say, I can't believe, because I could have done one of those Facebook posts, like young people today, I can't believe, look at this. And like, why would I do that? So I think we have to think about our motivations.
Yeah.
If you
advice.
see any friend posting something where you're worried about their safety, call them, get together with them, but also let an adult know, because sometimes, you can't 24/7 like carry someone through a crisis.
Good. Thank you. Emily, you're up.
Hi, so Dr. Heitner, I had a quick question. So I think you had started talking about Be Real, but I think it's a big topic that's kind of come up like in this field and whatnot. And I think a lot of parents and like students that might be listening could benefit from hearing about it. But what are your thoughts on it? Because I know there's a lot of controversy regarding how real it really is and all of that. And I know you had talked about students feeling excluded and whatnot. And I think that that's like a big part of that. So I don't know if, I think that's a good thing to hear about.
I mean, I'd love to hear about it from you too, because I'm not using Be Real. Like I do use Instagram. I mean, I use it in my like grown up way. Like, and so it's like all about like marketing my author life and my, so it's not, I'm not using Instagram the way most of the kids I've talked to are. And same thing with most social. But when I've talked to kids about Be Real, can be a little stressful, the idea of getting prompted and having to share, and a little disruptive if it happens at times you're trying to do other things. So ironically, I feel like you're supposed to be just like living your life. But I feel like if you are getting prompted and interrupted while you're living your life, that could be disruptive. And there's some privacy concerns too, like sharing teachers without their consent, et cetera. So those are the things I would just kind of like worry about. But I'm not hearing about it as much even like this month as it was literally like in the fall. But is it still pretty popular? Or?
I think it just depends on the person in the group. But I think there's definitely, it's still quite prevalent and whatnot. And people are still definitely like, oh, Be Real time and all that. So
yeah, I mean, I think social media in general is always a performance. And the thing to remember, if you're ever looking at social, whether it's Be Real, Snap, anything, and you feel left out, remember, like if the person was truly having the time of their life at that party, meeting the love of their life, or the person they're going to like tour in a band with or write a book with, they're going to be so busy enjoying that incredible conversation or eating that amazing food to like take a picture. So if somebody's taking a picture, the party's at least a little bit boring because they had a minute to be like, let's take a selfie, right? Like that means that they're not having the time of their life right at that moment. So I do think it's important to just remember it's always a performance. And when adults kind of slam on kids to me and say, oh, kids just are posting for attention, I'm like, well, what do you post for? Like, we're all posting for attention. But it's the performative piece is important to remember. Again, especially if you're home on a like Friday or Saturday night and other people are posting, it's like, that party could be actually totally boring, but you can make it look cute with a good filter. I just think it's important to remember that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Haley, you're back with a question.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for your presentation. And my question for you is, do you have any advice for teens who have been the victim of either rumors spreading or bullying online, and maybe even in person, if you have any experience with that with your daughter?
Yeah, so I would say it's really important to have boundaries. And if you've been a target of harassment, for example, to make sure that you're not looking at your phone right before bed. You might want to even take the app where that's happening off your phone or close that account and maybe take a break. And that's not, I think a lot of kids, especially younger kids, will hear that almost like as a punishment, like, and you didn't do anything wrong. But if you're getting targeted, like on Twitter, say, like one option would be to take a break from Twitter. And maybe, start again later. The other thing is to make sure other people in your life know. So if you're anyone who's getting bullied, their parents should know about it. Make sure that school knows. There may be a way to change your class schedule or other things. If it's happening anonymously, then there may be legal things that can happen. If someone's ever threatening you by threatening to expose pictures, for example, that's a very serious legal matter, and a very sternly worded lawyer letter to that person's parents might shut that down real fast. So I think it's really important to recognize that you have rights. You have a right to be safe at school. You have a right to be safe at home. You have a right to be safe in your video games and in social media. But the reality is the social media companies may not do everything we'd like to protect young people out there. And so I do think it's important to make sure that you have supportive friends around you. And if you're just putting yourself out there, like Catlin Savato is putting herself out there as an activist, people who do that are going to get trolled to some degree. Like there's going to be some negativity, not necessarily bullying, but like some negativity. And so any kid who's putting themselves out there, whether it's like an art site or activism, anything like that, should have some adults and supportive peers in their kind of squad. Like you should not be just out there on your own. And that could be someone who's like checking your comments and deleting the uglies, right? And saying like, nope. That could be, someone who's like potentially reading your email if you're being targeted. No one should be alone with this stuff. And it's really, really important that anyone who's doing that kind of harmful behavior, gets the support that they need to stop, and that they recognize that it's very serious. And it is a form of violence, and that it is against the law. So I think sometimes it's easy to have online disinhibition where you forget that there's another person on the other end of the screen. And that's true with any interaction online, right? Where there are other people seeing that comment. Right. And a lot of kids experience bullying maybe as a bystander, but it still affects them, even if they're not the target. And so I think it's important for parents to understand that your kid may have been exposed to pretty hateful things, and hopefully it wasn't directed at them, and that's something, but it still affects your child if they've witnessed that.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Good. And we're going to hear back from Shannon. Shannon is a senior at Glenbard North. Shannon?
Hi. So another thing that you talk about a lot is parents' relationship with kids. So what do you think parents get wrong the most about their teens' social media use? Because I know that a lot of parents might not be on social media, so they might not understand it. So like, what do you think they get wrong? Like, what's the most common misconception that you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think parents don't really understand how much of it is a performance. So like I've had parents be like, my kid posted that they're having a bad time on vacation. Do they really hate us? And I'm like, well, maybe, but they might also just like be fronting a little for their friends and like actually be having a kind of a great time on vacation with you, or at least an okay time. I mean, parents are parents, right? I'm sure it's up and down, but like, let's say, most of it is good, but you're going to post also when you want that attention and validation. So you're going to post when it is annoying or you want people to sort of feel something. So I think parents kind of need to not overreact to stuff like that. And just also recognize that a lot of what kids want is what any of us wanted at any age, whether your parents are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 30s, like they wanted their friends to be there for them. They wanted to look cute in a new outfit and be appreciated. They wanted to be seen as like intelligent, thoughtful people with a brain and like not treated like dummies, and so much of what adults need to do with teenagers is respect them and ask them like how they can be helpful. Right. Whether that's figuring out what school curricula should look like or whether that's, social media. And so I think asking your kid what they think and also asking them if there are ways that they could, tweak their algorithm by following things that are more positive as well. Especially with younger kids, I think it's important to talk with kids about the algorithm to make sure they understand that if they're following someone who's like an influencer or whatever, that is really exposing them to a lot. And definitely the younger a kid is, the more I would be talking with them about that and making sure that they understand kind of, that maybe they want to follow people who are more positive if they're following people, that are not sharing a positive message.
Really
Thank
quick
you.
follow-up question. So
Mhm.
I'm very close with my parents, and my parents also have like some social media, and they do their thing. Obviously, not as much as like me and some of my teenage siblings do. Do you have any prompts for parents? Because there's a lot of parents in this meeting. Do you have any like quick go-to prompts for the parents just to say, hey, what are you doing? Or something like this to like start that connection? Because sometimes there's such a disconnect between like the teenager or like the kid and the parent. So do you have any like quick go-to prompts that don't sound so confrontational?
Yeah, maybe something like, hey, have you ever seen someone post something where they seem really different in real life versus, online, or like met someone, like a lot of times you'll meet someone that you already saw online before you met them in person. And so like, is there anyone where you met them in person, they were so different than you expected, and just getting into that question.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. We're getting to the close here. Emily, who is a junior from Glenbard South, has a question. And we're, as I said, getting close here. Thank you, girls. Thank you.
Yep. So kind of similar to Shannon's question, but what's one of the biggest misconceptions that students have about their public life online?
I do think sometimes people forget who can see them, or they may get very caught up in the idea that like being famous or influential is like easy and fun. And I think relatively few people get to be like super famous, but it kind of looks easy when you look at people and like, especially TikTok, like you can go viral very fast. But I think like some people who've had that experience don't find it as fun and find it more stressful or find it just weird and disconcerting. So I think that the idea that like you're going to get on there and it's going to be amazing, I think is a misconception. Even going back a few years to the movie 8th Grade, where, it's like kind of pre-TikTok, but she's like trying to be on YouTube. I think it's like a pretty cringy watch, maybe not for everyone, but definitely something that would help parents understand a little bit of what those misconceptions might be about, like, how to make your life look a certain way.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
So I have one last question. It seems to me that parents are really struggling nowadays with their own addiction to devices. And my sense is it becomes a challenge then to how can I help my child? Because as we know, it is so very addicting. It's very difficult for an adult. And I don't know, we feel like hypocrites. Am I right about that perception that I have?
Yeah, I think we all are definitely, I mean, if you read like Anna Lemke's Dopamine Nation, like we're all definitely affected by our devices in different ways. And I certainly have to be conscious about it. And I've definitely been called out by my kid who's like, wait, didn't you say no double screening and screen-wise, mom? And like, why do you have your phone out while we're watching TV? So for sure, 100%. And I think our kids are seeing everything we do. If we text and drive, they're seeing that. If we're obsessed with our social media, we're seeing that. And I think we all need to think about what we're modeling, whether we have little kids at home and they're like coming in bed with us on Sunday morning and there's like a nest of chargers in the bed versus like older kids who are seeing some of the other things we might do, including the ways we might be different than our public presence, right? So I think that's very important, is that we want to act in ways that are ethical and aligned with our beliefs, and really be ready to ask your kids, even like, what's the least favorite tech habit that I have? Like, is there something I could be working on? And that's a very humbling question to ask your kids. So like, ask it when you're getting along and things are good. Don't ask it like if you're already in conflict. But I do think that's a brave question. And I think, like I learned that my kid doesn't like when I like half close my laptop. He was like, just close it all the way. I'm like, oh, okay. Because I would like half close and kind of listen, and I was kind of half listening. So
one last question, and this is a good one too. I hope you don't mind. How does
No,
flipping
it's
through TikToks and memes affect attention?
we don't know, but it does. I mean, like, and I'm not a cognitive person. I'm a cultural historian of media, but there's a lot of brain research, and some of the brain research is a little scary. But it does feel like, to get, even like a too long email, honestly, like feels like it's going to miss a lot of people these days. And there's all these, new books coming out about brevity and like being brief. So, I mean, I think, get it in there fast. And we all want to be doing things that help us practice longer attention, whether it's playing chess, meditating, anything that gives ourselves some stretch. Just like you don't want to only work one muscle group in the gym. You don't want to only use one kind of attention, and your scrolling attention and your social media attention is kind of the shallow attention. Don't only work that muscle group.
Devorah, I'm always learning from you, and I know I can speak for the students that are listening. We've got some kids in reality listening tonight. We've got these three amazing students as well. We're sharing the Q&A. You'll find it on the Glenbard Parent Series YouTube channel. And there's so much there. It's always a pleasure, and we can't wait till your book comes out in the fall, and we'll all go get it. Growing Up Public. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for the trust of your time. This is where we go hug the kids. So let's go do that.